order to steer the minds of the people and to give a pretext for the government reaction that's coming and for these lengthened and prolonged shutdowns. Here's an image I made for a previous video. You can see this is one example I have. My mother died on the 22nd of March, 2020 at 10:55 a.m. at the hospital. She was admitted for a fall into a door jamb the day before. She was 83 and a half and her body couldn't handle it. The poster here said goodbye to her Friday afternoon, the 21st, signed a do not resuscitate paper and left. Their brother had driven 7 hours from Georgia and he was lied to and denied access. She was tagged as COVID-19 but died from her fall, a false positive that was coerced and a lie from the start. And then in all caps, yes, they are lying, period, exclamation points. And you can see up here some guidance that are coming from these official organizations, oftentimes international decisions that are driving the statistics. It says, in cases where a definite diagnosis of COVID-19 cannot be made, but it is suspected or likely, for example, the circumstances are compelling within a reasonable degree of certainty, it is acceptable to report COVID-19 on a death certificate as probable or presumed. And we have a lot of other examples of this. Now, this was the main article that I had seen that made me want to do a whole video, just kind of going back through all the different data points that we've seen pointing to inaccuracies in the testing, as well as inaccuracies in the numbers. False reports of COVID, for example. The article here is entitled, CDC Suspends the Reporting of Influenza Data During the Coronavirus Outbreak. Usually around this time, they would be telling us about how much flu there was going throughout society. Yet suspiciously, they're stopping with the flu numbers because of COVID-19. Now, you have to ask why that is, because flu and COVID-19, from what I can tell, and I have no idea for sure, but they are often attributed with similar mortality rates. They say that COVID is more infectious, but it's a little bit less deadly. A lot of people are asymptomatic and never feel a thing. That's what they tell us. I don't know what's going on, people. I don't claim to have any health knowledge here. I'm just trying to make sense of this, and I'm very skeptical of these players that are prophesizing to us about the importance of vaccines and shutdowns and contact tracing. I don't trust these people. So let me start with a tweet from Candace Owens, which I thought was very interesting. She says, flu season has ended. According to the CDC, an estimated 24,000 Americans have died from the flu this season, down from 80,000 flu deaths in 2018. It's a miracle. That's a difference of 56,000 Americans from 2018 to the current period. Now, if you go to the Center for Disease Control's website, they have something called a weekly U.S. influenza surveillance report, the Flu View. And I also want to draw your attention to the graphic here. It looks like they're depicting the flu just like they depict the COVID virus, with these like sphere orb things with these little pokey sticks coming out of all of them, with the little balls on them. Kind of looks like a globe getting nuked all around the face of it. So all over this page, it just tells us about how the COVID-19 is affecting these numbers. So you have to wonder, is it what they say here? Or is it maybe these 56,000 people are put into a different bucket because that's more important right now for these, quote, healthcare providers and these governments and so on and so forth, and these international institutions that are often funded by the Gates Foundation. It seems like they're being opportunistically labeled COVID when we don't really know. So it says here, the number of people and their reasons for seeking care in the outpatient and ED settings is changing. This impacts data. Use the data with caution. This is the key part here. Key updates for week 16, ending April the 18th, 2020. Laboratory confirmed flu activity as reported by clinical laboratories is now low. Flu activity is now low. Influenza-like illness activity continues to decrease and is below the national baseline. The percentage of deaths due to pneumonia or influenza is high, But the increase is due primarily to COVID-19, not influenza. Right? It seems very strange to me that COVID's on the run here, but influenza's resting on its laurels. It's like, my bro COVID's got this one. I don't buy it. I don't think the flu would cease to impact people because COVID is going around. Now, they also have a lot of videos going around on the internet where you have these doctors and nurses talking about the problems with these tests and what are they actually really testing for. There's a lot of people saying that they're really testing for a specific RNA genetic sequence but it could be a lot of different things. It could be a data grab. It could be they're actually giving us results for an entirely different thing for an entirely different reason. If you're the establishment and you get to go around telling people who's sick, who's not, who has to be quarantined, etc., who has to take what medication and whatever, it gives them a lot of power. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, this was an interesting article that we started with here. Surprising move, CDC has suspended its collection of data for this year's flu season, prompting many to wonder, why would they make such a decision? So I've been really liking this Twitter channel, DC_Drano. He says, the CDC is caught misleading America on influenza data. During the prior 2 flu seasons, it collected data from October the 1st to May 19th, that was 17-18, and September the 30th to May 18th, 18-19. For some reason, they stopped collecting data this year on April 4th, 2020. Very, very interesting. They're going to not even tell us what the flu numbers are, because I think we're going to know that they're just trying to throw everything in as COVID. That's what we're really getting at here. A lot of people are suspicious that they are pumping up these COVID numbers. And then there's this follow-up thought here from Rogan. Did this year's seasonal flu season suddenly end when the COVID lockdowns began? Or are they purposefully stopping the collection of seasonal flu data 1.5 months earlier than normal to help artificially boost the COVID numbers? Are seasonal flu deaths now being counted as COVID? Rogan asks. Let's remember that they were really pushing that this was going to be a deadly, severe flu season, and everyone needed to get their flu shots. Yet they totally dropped the ball in getting us this fake data. This data. So here is one place where they admit that they're not going to be telling us any data after April 4th. The week of April 4th was the last week in-season influenza burden estimates will be provided for the 1920 season. Wow. Great question at the end here. Why do you believe the CDC stopped collecting data on this year's numbers? And also, speaking of the CDC, why do you think that the CDC was caught sending out tests that were actually tainted and infected with the virus that these people were worried about having, that were getting tested for it? And they received a tainted test from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and we're supposed to take these people seriously now. So flu numbers are way down and now they're going to stop reporting it. What do you all make of that? When the government arrested preachers at church and mothers at playgrounds but let criminals out of jail, I started asking questions. And just to remind you, here's the mother who was arrested for letting her kids play in the park.
Wait, where your kids? Can't play on the playground? I've got your kids, Sarah. As a person, does this make sense to you? As a person, not as a police officer, as a person, does this make sense to you?
His mother is being arrested for being in with her kids. Letting her kids in the playground.
Isn't that interesting? We hear the person in the background yell, "It's the flu." There might be something to that. That's kind of also what Candace Owens joked about in her tweet. Hashtag not the flu, bro. That's what people are saying. They're like, the New Age priest class, the scientists that the media tells us are legit. They tell us this is not anything normal. This is something to be very concerned about.
I just want to be clear in terms of the definition of people dying of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis. So that means that if you were in hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means that technically, even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death. So everyone who's listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death. I hope that's helpful.
For Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx, can you talk about your concerns about deaths being misreported by coronavirus because of either lack of testing or standards for how they're characterized?
So I think in this country, we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality. And I think the reporting here has been pretty straightforward over the last 5 to 6 weeks.
A liberal approach to mortality in regard to recording coronavirus deaths, and yet straightforward. So a straightforward liberal approach? Prior
to that, when there wasn't testing in January and February, that's a very different situation and unknown.
Remember, all the tests to this day are still, by their own words, highly inaccurate.
There are other countries that if you had a pre-existing condition, and let's say the virus caused you to go to the ICU and then have a heart or kidney problem, some countries are recording that as a heart issue or a kidney issue and not a COVID-19 death.
What if it was the heart or kidney issue that caused you to go to the hospital and then they tested you for cerveza bug? See, what they like to say is that regardless, you're there from cerveza bug. So if you died with cerveza bug, well, then cerveza bug was the cause of death.
Right now, we're still recording it, and the great thing about having forms that come in and a form that has the ability to mark it as COVID-19 infection, the intent is right now that if someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death. So I don't see that there's been a barrier in testing to diagnosis.
But let's listen to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation cerveza bug task force member, Anthony Fauci.
I think there's so much focus now on coronavirus that, particularly if you take New York, which we all know is having a disproportionately higher proportion of the burden of the entire country is right now in New York. I can't imagine if someone comes in with coronavirus, goes to an ICU, and they have an underlying heart condition and they die, they're going to say cause of death, heart attack. I cannot see that happening, so I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Of course it's not going to be a problem. For them. Let me recap. Both Birx and Fauci, with the tacit approval of Trump and Pence, just admitted that everybody who dies with the cerveza virus, according to the highly inaccurate tests, which seem to be working out in favor of the Johns Hopkins death map a large percentage of the time, which in turn makes people more and more fearful with each passing day, everybody who dies with the cerveza virus needs to be marked as having died from the cerveza virus on their death certificates, which is literally the textbook definition of falsifying an official document.
And